I've had a bunch of burp extension ideas bouncing around in my head for years now. My problem is I'm just not that good of a developer. Don't get me wrong, I can write burp extensions. I've done it many times. I am proficient in Java. I'm just not good at writing the amounts of code I would need to make my extension ideas fully come to life. Well, along comes vibe coding, and as much as I hate to admit it, it's just getting better and better. So much so that Portswigger added an official Claude.md file to their extension starter project to make it easier to use vibe coding. I made a video recently showing how to set up Claude Code precisely for creating burp extensions. I'll link to that video in the description. Today, I'm going to demonstrate the result of one of my vibe coding efforts. I managed to roll not one, not two, but 3 extension ideas into a single cohesive extension that actually makes sense. This one's a bit special because it's something I've already started using in my day job, and honestly, I've wanted this for so long. It's one of those tools that helps with a bunch of small annoyances you previously had to work around. So without further ado, let me introduce you to my new extension, Collector. So before we get into Collector and how it works and why you would even use it, I have to at least pay homage to one of the extensions that really inspired this, which is TokenJar. I used TokenJar for years. I've loved TokenJar. It's been really useful. If you've never used TokenJar before, effectively what it allowed you to do was define a regular expression, which would then match requests or responses, extract a value, store it as a token, and then you could effectively automatically update subsequent requests with that token. So think about a cross-site request forgery token that changes, every few minutes or every response, right? That's something you need to keep track of and updates, especially useful if you want to do any kind of automated testing, scanning, using repeater, using intruder, some kind of session state where you have to maintain a particular token over time. It's functionality the browser normally would do on its own, but obviously since we're proxying through Burp, you have an issue because Burp's not operating at that level, right? And so I used TokenJar for quite a long time. The problem with TokenJar, other than not being updated since 2022, it's a bit tricky to use. So honestly, I've used it for so long and I still don't quite understand in specific circumstances of when and where it works, right? So you have like proxy intruder repeater enabled up here, which I think just monitors these tools for these tokens, because it definitely performs replacement in other tools. But that's really not that clear what these actually do. And, you could only extract from a specific path. It would get replaced in every single request. It's very confusing. I thought, okay, there has to be a better way of doing this, because ideally what you want is you want to have a ridiculous amount of fine-grained control over where tokens are extracted from, and then also a separate fine-grained control over where tokens are replaced. And so that's kind of the core thing about Collector. I'm not going to lie, it's complicated, but I think it is complicated out of necessity. I'm not going to explain what global controls does right now or defaults. I mean, export import's pretty self-explanatory, but what we're going to do is we're just going to jump in to this application here, which I have vibe coded as well. It's basically just a demo for the purposes of showing what Collector can do. So it has admin123 is the password, and you'll see it uses JWTs. Maybe I can zoom in on that. Tokens expire in 10 minutes. They auto refresh every 1 minute. Now, obviously, auto refreshing every 1 minute is a bit absurd. It's just for demo purposes, right? But effectively, we're logged in, so we can view different projects, I guess. We can edit these projects. We can delete specific projects. Let's delete this one. Pretty easy, a pretty simple app. And if we go back to the proxy, we can see that, scroll down actually, where was the login? Login was done here. Okay, so we logged in using username and password. It gave us an access token and a refresh token. Some of the requests, like the products API, is public, so it doesn't need a bearer token, right? Same with viewing a specific project, but if we want to update a product, we need the bearer token. And if we want to delete a product, we need the bearer token. And here's that refresh call. So the reason it happens every minute is literally just so it's easy to see in the demo. But the refresh token is used, which gets a new access token and a new refresh token. That's all updated. So because the access token only lasts for 10 minutes, you might start scanning one of these requests. And, if a request has a certain number of parameters, then midway through the scan, the JWT expires, and suddenly your scan is completely useless from that point on because all of the requests it's sending are completely unauthenticated. So we need a way to effectively track and make sure we're updating that token value, right? This JWT. And so there are a few ways we can do that, right? We want to effectively monitor requests that look like this, API auth login, okay, just in case there's a new login. But we also want to monitor requests to API auth refresh and extract the latest JWT and make sure that overwrites any current JWT that we have. And so let me show you how you do that in Collector. So we go up to here, and Collector uses the concept of buckets. I don't know why I use the concept of buckets, but I'm calling everything a bucket. So you can define a bucket, and a bucket can basically hold 0 or more tokens. And so we're going to create a JWT bucket. Each bucket appears up here. So this is number 1. This is the first bucket, JWT, and it has a bucket configuration. So by default, it's enabled. That's great. We actually want this bucket to collect stuff, right? So enabled is just means the collection rules, the token rules, the replacement rules, they all happen. You can have 2 types of bucket, and this is mostly for thinking about replacement, right? So you can have a queue or a stack, really. So first in, first out, last in, first out, basically how you want a token to enter and exit the bucket. So when a token is used, do we use the most recent one, or do we use the oldest one, effectively? Tracking a singular token, it doesn't actually matter, but let's just leave it at the first one. The max size, so -1 for infinite, you can set that to 0 or literally up to as many as you want. For this, because we only want to track 1 token at a time, we're going to set it to 1. And this is important for tracking JWTs. When the bucket is full, we don't want to reject new tokens. We want to replace the latest token, or in this case, we could choose replace oldest token because the bucket only will ever have 1 token in it. But that means effectively, as soon as a new token is seen by Collector, it's going to replace whatever token it's currently storing. For this purposes, we don't really need this only allow unique tokens, but we're just going to leave it checked anyway. So now we can go to token collection. And this is effectively defining where in requests or responses we want to extract tokens from. Okay, so we want to collect those tokens from. Now, in this instance, we want to collect them from responses, right? Whether we're dealing with this auth refresh or the login, the token is always in the response. So we can disable requests here. We only care about responses that come through the proxy. So if I just toggle that, so collection tools off, we can just check the proxy. We don't want to monitor all URLs though. We only want to monitor 2 URLs. We want to monitor this login. So if I right click copy URL and click paste URL, it's going to paste that all the way in there. This all uses regular expressions, by the way. And if we go to this one, auth refresh, let's copy this URL and paste that in. There we have both of our URLs. Let me go and grab an example. I'm going to actually copy this entire response, and you'll see why in a minute. If we go back to the token collector, we want to define a collection pattern. And I'm just going to put this response in the regex tester down here, because this is going to be how we're actually going to check whether our regular expression is matching what we want to do. And you can see really what we want is we want to match on this access token part up here. We need access token. We do need a colon, space, and then a double quote. And how this works is you define a capturing group. So a capturing group is basically that. And we want to capture effectively, I mean, you can define this in terms of the base64 URL encoded values, right? So all the potential like letters and periods that you might want to use, or it's honestly kind of easier in this case to define a group that means no double quotes. All right. So effectively, we're going to match all non-double quote characters until we get to this double quote. If you don't understand regex, sorry, but this extension pretty heavily relies on regular expressions here. And so, yeah, this matches effectively this, and it will extract only the actual token value. And you can see that here. So full match is this. Captured groups, group 1 is what we care about. This is group 1 that actually matches the entire token. So group 1 is going to be the token that is stored. You can enable a few different modes here. This does accept tokens with new line characters. We won't cover post-collection JavaScript just yet, but let's click OK. We've defined a collection pattern. Now, that was just for the API auth refresh, but I believe the login uses exactly the same format. So, but if the login, for example, called this access token something different, right, or it had a slightly different format, you could literally just add another collection pattern and it would work just the same. Okay, so now if we go to tokens, oh look, we have a token in here. Why do we have a token in here? Well, while I was rambling on, this post API auth refresh fired, and it looks like this token ends in SWK. Yeah, SWK is this token. And basically the token truncates by default to 100 characters just in the display. If you double click, you can see the full token there. You can edit this token. Okay, you can insert new lines, basically anything, and you can see an escaped version if you ever need it there. We can add new tokens ourselves. We can copy this token. We can delete this token. We can do a bunch of stuff. So I won't be able to go over everything in this video, but we can copy all of the tokens, paste tokens, deduplicate tokens, clear, save tokens to a file, load tokens from a file. And by the way, if there are new line characters in any of these tokens, these save and load methods account for that in various different ways. Because obviously, if you're saving tokens to a file, it's going to be one per new line, but the save tokens dialog will encode or will ask you whether you want to encode the tokens if they contain new lines. All right, let's finally go to token replacement. So we obviously want to update several requests. Like we want to update requests, specifically this authorization header. And so we don't care about updating anything in responses. Realistically, we can deselect all of these. Let's just say we want repeater and scanner and extensions and intruder, right? So I feel like these 4 are the ones that you will use this most. You probably don't want proxy because it's just going to get really complicated. But for intruder, if you're doing fuzzing attacks, you'll definitely want to keep the token up to date. Repeater, the same thing. Scanner extensions, definitely. This is important when using the last token. So the idea is you might want to, in certain circumstances, grab a token from this bucket and then use it and then delete it from the bucket. By default, that's not enabled, but you can use and remove. In this case, we want to use and keep, because we want to keep this token until it's updated. If the bucket's empty, do nothing. We'll go back to this in a sec. Replacement URLs, though. All in-scope URLs is fine, actually, for this, right? We don't want to restrict the URLs, but at some point you might, especially if you're dealing with multiple in-scope sites, you can add just a host here, and it will just do it for all of that host. Okay, we go here. Let's send this put request to repeater. You'll notice the token has a prefix of bearer, right? It's pretty common with bearer tokens. You'll notice we didn't store bearer anywhere up here. In fact, we couldn't because the token didn't have the word bearer in it when we extracted it. We could have technically used this post-collection JavaScript, but we're going to use pre-replacement JavaScript. So effectively, this is JavaScript, very simple JavaScript, by the way, and you can do a bunch of operations on the token before it's used by the token replacement rules. And in this case, what we want to do is we want to prefix that string bearer with a space, and you can just do return bearer as a string with a space plus token. This JavaScript has access to token, which is just literally a variable containing the token, right? And all we're going to do is return the string bearer with a space concatenated with a token. And you can see actually there's a preview window over here. So if the token is test token, then what you're going to get is bearer space test token. And the next thing we want to do is add a replacement rule. You can set various locations, header, URL parameters, body parameters, cookies, even generic regex. We just want a header. We want the authorization header. And there's a little replacement tester window down here. So in requests, you'll see this is a fake request here. But in the modified request, you'll see authorization test token. And if this test token had been prefixed like we set here, then it would show like this. Okay, but this is all just a tester. This isn't stored at all. This part is what we actually care about. We click OK there. It's going to save the authorization replacement rule. Now, if we go back to repeater, remember we enabled repeater as one of the replacement tools. Let's just take out the authorization header. So this request should not work right now if we sent it, right? Just like this, because there is no authorization header. However, if we click send, you'll see it does work. And if we check the logger, click this repeater, this is the actual request that left burp, you'll see that collector added that authorization header right down there. Ends in ONY. We go to collector. ONY is indeed the current token. So if we just sent this request with this old authorization header and click send, it still works. If we check the logger, that's because it updates or adds an authorization header if one is present or not. So either way, it's going to add it. And look, it even updated the token, right? Because there was this auth fresh. You see the token now ends in AN8, and indeed collector monitored that, collected that token, and used it to update the request. Let's go back to this post-collection JavaScript, or just JavaScript in general. There are 4 instances where you can use JavaScript to modify a token. There are 2 instances where you can use it before it's stored, and there are 2 instances where you can use it before the token is then used. So what you can do, the earliest instance is to use it associated with a single pattern, a collection pattern. So you can run post-collection JavaScript. So effectively what that means is as soon as this pattern extracts a token, this JavaScript is run on it. So you might want to do something like decode it, maybe if there's some if it's encoded in a weird way, you might want to decode the token before it's stored. Entirely up to you. I just felt this was a kind of a neat way of doing it, but that will run first. Okay, so after the collection pattern JavaScript is run, then there's this sort of global bucket level JavaScript. So this will run on the tokens after they've been processed, right? So effectively, this JavaScript runs per pattern. This runs per token, independent of whichever pattern extracted it, if you have multiple patterns defined. But again, this is all before it's stored. So this will get run, then the token will be stored. And then finally, we can do this token replacement bucket level JavaScript, which is running on all the tokens as they come out of the sort of token bucket itself. And then finally, the last JavaScript that runs, if it's here, is the replacement rule level JavaScript. There's a ridiculous amount of control on this extension about what you can do with it, which is why I really like it. And again, I just didn't want to make any assumptions about when people might want to modify the token before or after it's stored. Another thing we might want to do when you're on a test, you might just want to generally monitor for tokens that you see. A really common example that I found multiple times while I'm testing is I might want to enumerate all the UUIDs that I've seen for a product in an application, just so I have a nice list of known UUIDs. And in this application, we do have a list of products, right? These all have different UUIDs. Actually, we can see them here. I might want to monitor for those just, as I'm browsing the application. Again, this is a simple example, right? These might not be in a lovely list here. These might just be on individual pages and you have to crawl the application to find them all. But let's create a token bucket in collector that monitors for UUIDs and then just stores as many as it finds. If we click the plus symbol here and enter bucket name, let's do product UUID. All right, so bucket's enabled. We don't actually care about the bucket type because in this example, we're not actually going to be using any replacements. We're just going to add. Max size, we do want infinite. When bucket's full, well, it can't. It can't ever be full if it's infinite. Only allow unique tokens. We definitely want that. We don't care about duplicate tokens, so we can remove them. Go to token collection. We can monitor requests and responses for this. And we might just want to monitor the proxy. Again, all in scope URLs is fine. I do have this in scope, so that's okay. Now the collection pattern, I have a handy UUID matching pattern here. So I'm going to surround this pattern with parentheses for a capturing group. And by the way, you can actually add a comment if you want to. So UUID pattern we could put there, and that'll just have a comment here for you. And in fact, what we actually want to do, we want to monitor for URLs specifically. So we might want to see, okay, well, this kind of thing. So /products/ and then a UUID, sorry. Let's instead do that. So we need to put it before the capturing group, products, and then the UUID. And then here we go. So in API/products, there is this kind of format, right? And so we can actually copy this, go back here. I'm going to just paste that in. I'm going to steal the regex again from here, paste that in. So that's fine, I think. This should match requests. This should match responses. We have both of them selected. Proxy, we don't care about the post collection JavaScript. Tokens, good. We don't care about token replacement. There are no replacement rules, so even if this is all enabled, nothing's going to happen. Let's browse the application. Let's just click this and see what happens. Okay, perfect. What happened there was I clicked the page, the get API products call happened, and we got all of these UUIDs extracted. This is all the UUIDs right now in the application. And if we add a product, right, let's just add a product called test, product created successfully. This is the new UUID. It starts 568. Let's go back here. 568 is added here. This obviously depends on you defining this bucket and these collection rules before you start testing. What if you've tested an entire application and then realize at the end, okay, well, we'll realize halfway through, I actually want to collect some values. Well, thankfully, let's click clear tokens. That's going to delete all of the tokens. If we go back to the token collection page, you may have noticed in the top right, there's this parse proxy history. And if we click that, we get this lovely window here. You can basically parse the oldest X number of items, the newest X number of items from the proxy, right? The requests and responses. We want to just keep it unlimited. That will literally parse through all of the requests and responses in the proxy and extract based on these rules. So it will still follow in scope. It'll still only look at requests or responses or both, whether you have these marked, and it will use these collection patterns. And if we just click parse, we can see items processed 333, tokens collected 33. And I believe that may actually be because I reset the application several times. So I think it's what it's actually doing. If we scroll back through, is when I was messing around with it earlier, I think it's found some of the older UUIDs that were generated randomly. So that's a funny instance. If I clear these tokens, then go back to parse proxy history. Let's keep the newest 100 items. It will literally go through the application, or go through the proxy history and extract as many matching things as you want. And so that's, I think, a pretty useful way of enumerating all these tokens. And we can obviously copy all the tokens to the clipboard. If we ever wanted to, we can save the tokens to a file. So that's the main collection aspect of collector. And the final part of collector that I wanted to show is honestly like the weirdest part of collector, but it kind of made sense to include it. And let me show you the use case for this. So we created a product called test. And let's say that we try and create another product called test. It's going to say product name must be unique. Okay. So there's a pretty common restriction in applications is you have a field like name and it has to be unique. But as you can see here, the description field doesn't have to be unique. Both of these products have the description of test. So the question then remains, okay, what happens if you want to scan this API products post request that actually creates a new product? Well, you can't really automate this because as soon as you change something, like let's say we want to test the description field, right? Well, as soon as we click send, it's going to say, oh, well, the product name must be unique. Okay, fine. Well, we have to increment that, send that. All right, great. Now we can add some more. Oh no, the product name has to be unique. Anytime you have to update any field that's associated with another field that has to be unique, you have to update the unique field too. And this is a real issue that I come across when scanning things, is you have to keep this fresh in some way. And so I figured, why can't Collector, solve this? It's not technically a collection, but we can do something about this. So let's create a new bucket, unique name, and we're gonna enable it. We're gonna set the max size to 0. The max size technically doesn't have to be anything, but 0 just makes this easier. Everything else is fine. We don't care about collection rules. We're not going to use any collections. We're not going to use any tokens. What we're going to use is token replacement, and let's put it in repeater, scanner, extensions, intruder. We want to update the requests, and we don't care about when using last token. This can be kept the same, but this if bucket is empty, do nothing. Previously, literally, we've just set this to do nothing in everything, right? Because we didn't care about if the bucket was empty. But now we have a bucket that is permanently empty because we have a max size of 0, and we're never going to add anything to this. We don't have any collection rules. Why would we want to use this? Well, you might want to use this if you want to generate tokens from thin air. And so you might want to set a token as a static value for some reason, right? That's the thing you can do. You can literally set a value here, test token or something like that. If you have a replacement rule, the replacement rule would just use test token over and over and over and over again if you want it to. That's just a feature. I don't honestly see a use case for it, but I figured, hey, let people use static values. Generate value from regex is what I love. So in this case, you just define a regular expression. Collector will, if there's an associated replacement rule, use that regular expression, generate a value that's random but matches that regular expression, and use it. So if we do uppercase, lowercase, 0 to 9, and let's give it a length between, let's say, 5 and 10. So basically a string comprised of any of these character ranges or characters from these ranges that's between 5 and 10 characters long. So we can keep all in scope URLs checked. We don't want any replacement JavaScript. We just want a replacement rule. And what we're going to do is we're going to replace this name value with just a placeholder, and really the placeholder can be anything as long as it's unique. So what we might do is name underscore token, right, in all caps. We double click and copy that, go back to collector, add replacement rule. We want to do generic regex, and we want to match a group that contains name underscore token. Regex group 1 is what we want to replace. That's fine. We don't want to replace all occurrences. I mean, you might want to do this, but I just want to replace the first one and don't want any JavaScript. We click OK, then go here, and hopefully if I click send, there we go. Product created successfully. There's the name. As you can see, I believe that's 10 characters. Random characters because we chose between 5 and 10. If I resend this, exactly the same. I mean, maybe I'll even modify the description. Let's just do collector rules. Send. There we go. We get another one. That one is 9 characters long. And, we can just keep clicking send, and it's literally going to generate a new name every single time. And you can do this with as many tokens as you want, right? So you can define even more tokens, even more buckets with different regex values, different replacement rules. Yeah, that's how that part works. I just thought really interesting way of using my own extension to sort of solve another problem that I had. And in one sense, it kind of makes sense. But it's just a bit of a quirk anyway. The final thing I did want to cover is the settings, the global controls. So now we know what buckets are and what token collections are. This is literally just global controls, master controls for all of the buckets. So if you want to, for whatever reason, stop all the buckets from doing all of their collection functionality, their replacement functionality, etc., you can just uncheck the enabled box there and everything will stop. If you, for whatever reason, want to disable monitoring for a specific tool across all buckets, right? So if you no longer want the proxy to be used, you can uncheck that. And I believe it will then go, yeah, so the proxy will be unchecked here. You won't be able to even check it. It does look like it's checked, right? And that's because this bucket technically wants it to be checked. But as long as it's disabled here, this bucket can't use it, even if it's checked. All right. And then replacement, exactly the same thing. If you want to like disable repeater and scanner, let's go back to unique name. Now we see repeater and scanner are grayed out. Save configuration. Technically, everything does get saved automatically, at least it should. But there's a nice button if you like clicking save configuration buttons. Defaults. Basically, this is what controls what options are checked for bucket configuration, token collection, token replacement, whenever you create a new bucket. So you might want to create a bucket with the token collection sources completely disabled. You might want a standardized set of collection tools that are enabled when a collection bucket is created. And you can do that here. And finally, export and import. So you can export the bucket configurations to a JSON. You can import them from a JSON. Technically, these are preserved in the project. So if you restart Burp and load the same project, these should load as well. The one thing that doesn't load is the tokens. So if I was to reload this extension, all of these tokens would disappear. If I was to restart Burp, reopen this project, even though these buckets appear, these tokens would disappear. And so that's why the save tokens exists, right? If you want to basically save them between Burp loads, or you can save all tokens, and that will effectively ask you to select a folder, and it will save all the tokens to individual save files in that folder. But yeah, that is Collector. I hope you get some good use out of it. Please report bugs or anything really, feature requests. Like I said, I've been using it for a while now, and I'm really enjoying using it. So I hope you folks do as well. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe for more hacking content, and leave a comment. It really helps the channel out. If you've built your own Burp extensions or have ideas you'd love to see coded up, drop them below. I might feature one in a future video. Until next time, happy hacking.